going to be talking about the life of Pi and him growing up in Pondicherry. And for some reason, I've been like really thinking about his early life, and it just seems so magical. Even like the word magical, that's what I could think of when I look back to his moments in Pondicherry, because it's so crazy how him growing up in a zoo surrounded by all these kinds of animals, it was definitely more than a childhood, a typical childhood compared to other children, right? I mean, it was like Pi had a front row seat to nature's raw and beautiful chaos. I mean, he learned so much about animals. And honestly, it's not just about knowing what animals are there. It's about, for him, it's about understanding them, respecting their space, and learning their behaviors. Like Pi's knowledge of the animals and how they interact is something he'll need later on when he's on the lifeboat with Richard Parker, right? Their survival instincts, his understanding of how animals think and act, it's everything when it comes to survival, and that's something Pi learned from a young age. His family zoo wasn't just a business for Pi. It wasn't just about profit. It was this window into the natural world, and Pi had this sacred connection with the animals. He wasn't just the son of the zoo's owner. He wasn't just like walking around. He was actually part of it, part of their lives. And while his dad, who was practical and focused on the zoo's operation, probably thought of the animals as more of business and profit, Pi saw them as beings with depth and personality and feelings and dignity of their own. I mean, I keep thinking about how his father, though practical and tough, had these moments that stuck with Pi, like when he showed Pi how dangerous the tiger was by putting him face to face. I mean, that was crazy, but Pi was so little, and his dad forced him to understand that the tiger wasn't to be messed with. I mean, this moment felt brutal, right? But it was exactly what Pi needed. It taught him to respect danger and survival. In a way, it was kind of like a wake-up call for Pi to understand that nature isn't just always pretty or friendly. It's not just his friends when he was little. They can be free. They can be fierce, and that's something he'll need to remember on the lifeboat. But Pi wasn't just shaped by his father. His relationship with his uncle was another important influence. His uncle was this adventurous, worldly figure who encouraged Pi's curiosity about the world. I mean, Mama G taught him how to swim and love water, which is so ironic, but it really opened his mind to the idea that the world is bigger than what's in front of you. It's almost like Pi's uncle gave him that push to look beyond and to think for himself. His uncle played this crucial role in showing Pi that there's a lot more room for exploration outside of the limits given to him. And honestly, I think this curiosity Pi has about everything, like religion, animals, nature. I mean, this shapes him to the kind of person he becomes, that he is. It's not just about being spiritually curious for him. It's about understanding that the world has layers, and Pi starts to peel back those layers early on. It's all these different things coming together, the zoo, the spiritual exploration, and the complicated family dynamics that form the foundation for everything Pi is going to face later on in the novel. I mean, all of it, the things Pi's learned, comes into play when his life gets turned upside down. And I can't help to think about how his childhood experiences are just this training ground, training ground for what's ahead, even if he doesn't know it yet. So since I was already talking about Pi's life as a young boy growing up in Pondicherry, I should also talk about one of the most significant things that was a part of his life as a young boy, which is his religion, and how unique his journey truly is. So for me, what really interests me about Pi's journey is the fact that Pi doesn't just settle on one religion. He embraces all three, which is Hinduism, Christianity, and Islam. It's not something you see every day. I mean, especially coming from a family where his dad's more focused on practical matters and the world around him expects a more, traditional approach to religion, like how we see in today's society. But Pi is so curious and so open-minded, and that curiosity really defines him. I mean, at first, his exploration of religion seems so innocent. He's just, a young boy who's drawn to these different spiritual practices and their rituals. But for Pi, it's more than that. It's deep and sincere. And it's this desire to connect with the divine. What's so fascinating about Pi is how he doesn't see these religions as being contradictory to each other. To him, they're all just different ways to connect with God, which is, again, so fascinating. And I think that says a lot about Pi's view of the world. It's not about being tied to one rigid belief. Instead, he sees each faith as an offering of its own, of the divine puzzle. The idea really stands out to me. It's as if Pi doesn't even question the validity of his beliefs. He doesn't go back and forth wondering if he's doing the right thing. He's just completely open to them, and he embraces each one with an almost childlike wonder and faith. That openness, that acceptance shows how personal faith can be. How it's about what resonates to you and not what society tells you right and wrong, And one of the things that I also love about Pi is his approach to faith. And honestly how genuine it is. It's not, I mean, from what I can see, from what I can read, it's not out of confusion or rebellion. Pai's not trying to prove anything to anyone. Instead, his religious journey is about a sincere lifelong quest to understand God and the world. It's remarkable for me. It's remarkable, and it's so fascinating that from a young age, Pai doesn't see any conflict in following all three religions. He doesn't feel like he has to pick one over the other. Each of them, for Pai, offers him a way to experience the divine, and he fully accepts that. When he's stranded on the lifeboat, when everything feels hopeless, it's his faith that keeps him going. Pai's early spiritual journey, his devotion to all these religions, teaches us that faith doesn't have to be limited. It doesn't have to fit into a neat little box. It can transcend boundaries. It can blend together, and it can help you make sense of the mysteries of life. And that's something Pai learns early on, and it's something that becomes crucial when he's alone in the middle of the ocean. You see it in his rituals and how he prays, even how everything around him seems to be falling apart. Each time Pai prays or remembers a religious practice, it's like he's grounding himself. It immediately calms him down. It makes him stay connected to something greater than himself. In the midst of all these chaos in the lifeboat, Pai's faith provides him with that anchor. It's almost like he uses the teachings, particularly their focus on prayer and devotion, to build a routine that keeps him going. It's like his gas on an engine, The way Pai incorporates all three faiths into his daily life during this time at sea shows just how essential his spiritual beliefs are to his survival. I mean, to be honest, without that, I honestly don't know how he could have kept going. Pai's exploration of faith isn't just about belief, it's about survival. And it's about hope and finding meaning in a world that doesn't always make sense. And I think that's something we can all learn from. So for our third journal entry, I am going to be talking about the huge turning point in Pai's life when his family decides to sell the zoo and immigrate to Canada. First of all, I can't even imagine how overwhelming that must have been for Pai. I mean, he was leaving everything behind: the animals, his friends, his childhood home in Pondicherry. I mean, it had to be heartbreaking for him. But at the same time, while I was reading his narrative, I think I was sensing excitement. I mean, moving to Canada represented a fresh start, a new adventure, but for Pai, at what cost? I keep thinking about the emotional weight Pai must have felt as they packed up and said goodbye to India. The place he loved, where he was surrounded by the animals he knew so well. It's not like he had a choice, though. His family's decision was driven by practical reasons. The economic situation had gotten tough, and moving to Canada seemed like the only option. But for Pai, this move wasn't just about a new life. It meant losing the world he had known, the one that shaped him into who he was. What strikes me about this moment is how insignificant it is in the grand scheme of things. That decision, which at time probably seemed like the hopeful step toward a better future. But it sets a stage for everything that follows, especially the shipwreck. It's like Pai's old world is about to be shattered, and he doesn't even know it yet. The move, the loss of the zoo, it all leads to the ultimate test of survival, the test of his resilience. And the shipwreck, the sinking of Simsum, and the emotional and psychological sinking of Pai's world, it suddenly thrusted him into this alien world, this world that he doesn't know anything about, the ocean. But now, he has to figure out how to survive on his own. It's almost like his loss of a past life of his family propels him into a new reality where survival is all that matters. What I find fascinating is that Pai doesn't immediately break down in despair. He doesn't fall apart. Instead, he goes into survival mode. I mean, the ship is sinking, and he's just seen his family and everything he knew be ripped away in an instant. In that moment, everything's been stripped away, and the only thing left for him to do is survive. And it's amazing, because even in the face of utter chaos and tragedy, Pai holds on to hope. Hope. He doesn't let himself be consumed by despair. And I think that's a huge part of who Pai is. It's like the spark of resilience within him. Even when everything is falling apart, he has this will to live, this drive, the drive to keep going. It also makes me wonder, why is Pai able to hold on to hope in such an extreme moment of crisis? I mean, is this kind of resilience something we're born with, or does extreme hardship bring this out of us? I think the way Pai reacts speaks volume about human nature. In this moment of crisis, Pai taps into something deeper, something that allows him to keep moving forward even when everything is against him. There's something else that's really interesting in the aftermath of the shipwreck. Pai's emotional numbness. For what it looked at, I mean, it truly is maybe the lack of food, water, energy, sleep. I mean, if I was in this situation, I'd also be tired to show emotions. But he lost his family, his world. I mean, for sure he's in shock, but he's also in this survival mode where he's trying to process the loss on such a deeper level, and as readers, we're thrown into this chaos with him. It's like we're experiencing that shock and helplessness alongside him, and that just makes the moment feels more intense. I really think that the shipwreck marks a turning point in Pai's transformation. I mean, it's obvious. It's not just the beginning of his struggle for survival. It's when he starts to wrestle with life and death, faith and survival all at once. His reaction to the shipwreck shows us, even in the face of overwhelming tragedy, humans have this incredible capacity to adapt and fight for their lives. He doesn't even know it yet, but this is the moment that will define him. The shipwreck is a defining moment in his journey where he goes from being this curious, spiritual boy, this innocent boy, to someone who has to rely on every ounce of strength and faith just to survive, just to breathe another breath. I mean, I guess that's what makes this moment so powerful. It's not just about surviving the storm or the shipwreck. It's about survival of Pai's spirit and its strength and its resilience, and that's going to be tested in ways we can't even imagine yet. For a fourth journal entry, I will be talking about the early days in the lifeboat and my reflection to it, because it really did make me curious about Pai and his reaction to things, right? And at the beginning, I can't help to feel overwhelming, like, as a reader, for me, it's too much. It's too much, because now suddenly he's thrown into this terrifying new world where everything is unfamiliar. He's not just dealing with the emotional trauma of the wreck and the loss of his family, but now he's face to face with the brutal reality of survival. I mean, alone with a zebra, an orangutan, a hyena, and eventually Richard Parker. I mean, when can you ever find yourself in this situation? I mean, only Pai can. Pai's knowledge of animals, everything he learned from growing up in the zoo, becomes his only lifeline. I mean, right away he realizes that this isn't a zoo anymore. It's not about keeping animals safe or observing them from a distance. It's about survival for him. The hyena is the first real threat for Pai, though. Understanding that hyena is a carnivore, he knows that the zebra and the orangutan is in danger. And sure enough, the hyena kills the zebra. And, Pai must be feeling a kind of terror that only we can imagine. His mind is probably racing, trying to process everything happening so quickly. But here's where Pai's zoo knowledge kicks in, right? He knows how animals behave. He understands the importance of dominance and territory for this type of predators. And it's this understanding that helps him stay alert and think on his feet. He's no longer the curious observer of animals, but now he's forced to think like one to survive. I mean, this is so fascinating, because everything that we talked about when he was growing up in Pondicherry is now being applied right now for him to survive. I mean, this is what strikes me the most. It's this chaotic moments that Pai has to step into this role, a new mindset, that now he has to shed the innocence of childhood and become a survivalist. It's not just about food and water anymore. It's about understanding how to coexist, how to live, how to breathe next to these dangerous animals, and navigating this deadly arena that is the ocean, where every decision could mean life or death. I mean, imagine, it must have felt like he was in a fight for his life every second of every day. One of the most significant things, and honestly the most memorable things in the life of Pai, is Pai's relationship with Richard Parker, which what we will be talking about in our fifth journal entry. Pai's relationship with Richard Parker, which is a Bengal tiger, it's definitely something to dive deeper into. In the beginning, Pai's relationship with the tiger is straight up terror. I mean, Richard Parker is a wild animal. Not just that, he's hungry, powerful, heavy, and very much a threat to Pai's life. When Pai first realizes he's stuck on this lifeboat with the tiger, I mean, I can't imagine the kind of fear that must have flooded him. He has to now figure out how to survive, how to avoid being eaten. The terror Pai feels is so raw and real at first. His whole world is about staying as far away from Richard Parker as possible. But what blows my mind is, now that I think about it, is how this relationship changes. Slowly, Pai starts to realize that if he's going to make it out alive, he can't just fear the tiger. He has to live with him. He has to be friends with him. He has to learn how to coexist with this tiger that he is so terrified of. And that's when we see Pai shift gears. I mean, one of the most important moments happens when Pai uses the whistle to assert his dominance. It's, again, one of the most memorable moments in the book. And honestly, still thinking about it gives me chills. And this moment is huge. It's like Pai's first real act of control in a world where so much is out of his hands. He's not just reaching out of fear anymore. He's taking charge. This is so exhilarating to read. Honestly, this moment marks the turning point in their relationship. Pai is no longer trying to escape Richard Parker. He's setting boundaries. Again, in this world the fittest wins, and he has to show Richard Parker that he himself is also fit. He's setting boundaries and ensuring that the tiger sees him as something to respect and not to eat. Now I keep thinking, why doesn't Pi just kill the tiger? I mean, it's easy to think that he'd be better off without Richard Parker, right? But Pi doesn't take that route. And it's fascinating. The more I reflect on it, the more I believe that Pi understands something crucial that not a lot of readers understand. I mean, Richard Parker is not just a threat, he's also a key part of Pi's survival. It's almost like Pi needs the tiger as much as the tiger needs him. Richard Parker forces Pi to stay alert, to maintain a routine, to keep going, to feel, to fear, to be able to survive, to be able to keep his mind going. So, when it's like in their strange and spoken pact, both fighting for their lives in this tiny, isolated world, what this whole dynamic really reveals is something deep about Pi's transformation. I think Richard Parker represents Pi's primal instincts, right? That raw fight for survival that kicks in when everything else falls away. As Pi learns to coexist with this tiger, he's not just learning about the tiger's behavior, he's learning about his own survival instincts. He's confronting his fear and finding a way to live with it instead of letting it control him. That, to me, is one of the most powerful parts of Pi's journey. It's not just about survival, it's about growth. And that is why I value this book so much. It's because Pi learns to live with the very thing that scares him the most. And again, that's one of the things that many readers can take away from this book. And I think, that is such a great metaphor for life, that there are so many things we fear, so many obstacles that seems impossible to face. But Pi's relationship with Richard Parker shows us that survival is about more than just overcoming these things. It's about learning how to live with them, how to adapt, how to keep moving forward, even when we're scared, when we're terrified, when we can't move. There's the relationship evolves, and I think that really mirrors Pi's own emotional and mental transformation. He goes from pure fear to a kind of uneasy understanding, and in that process he becomes a different person. Richard Parker isn't just an animal on the lifeboat, he is an essential part of Pi's journey. Not only does the tiger represent danger, but he also becomes the source of Pi's strength, his resilience, and ultimately his will to survive. Sixth journal entry, I want to focus on Pi's emotional and psychological battle with loneliness. Deep and difficult part of his journey, this isolation that he went through. Looking back and reading his story, it really makes me think what it means to truly be alone. And there's this one moment where Pi reflected and he realized that he's been alone for what felt like days and weeks, and this isolation really started to take a toll on him. And the ocean is massive, it's big. I mean, it's just blue. That's all he sees. It's this empty space. There's no one else to interact with. I mean, there's really only Richard Parker, the fish, the bird maybe, but literally there is nothing else. He is the only one communicating with himself. He describes this time as being like warped, and his thoughts begin to change, and how he can't even keep track of how long it's been. I mean, who can? It's the silence of the ocean. It's so eerie. He describes himself as being so terrified when the sun sets and it's finally nighttime, and he will have to sit there for hours in the dark, just alone with his thoughts, and honestly just filled with questions. If this is the night he is going to die, this is the night that will finally, everything, his suffering will come to an end. And again, like, what really stands out to me is the strain that this kind of isolation puts on Pi. He's cut off from everything and everyone, and this lack of human interaction really starts to take a toll on him. He can't think anymore. His thoughts are so warped, and it's so heartbreaking that it really makes me wonder, how does anyone hold on to their sanity in a situation like this? I mean, it's not funny, but imagine if this was me. I mean, I don't even know what I'm going to think about every day. I mean, I don't think I would have made it 227 days like Pi did, but the thing about Pi, and what really sets him apart from a lot of people, is that he leaned into his faith in this situation, in this crisis, where honestly, a lot of people would think that his faith failed him. But for Pi, this is what's saving him right now. This belief in God is truly what brought him out of this. But of course, when you're in a crisis like this, he starts to question his faith in God. He's like, why would he even allow him to suffer like this, right? Like, again, if he's gonna die anyway, why is there so much suffering before that? I mean, isn't death bad enough? But he starts to think, like, is there even any purpose to this pain? I mean, Pi is forced to confront not just his need for food and water, but his deepest doubts about life and his place in the world. He's grappling with the idea of meaning itself. I mean, what does any of the suffering really matter in the grand scheme of this, right? Grand scheme of things, right? I mean, what's so fascinating about Pai's struggle is that he can't really escape himself. I mean, it's not really fascinating. It's more like horror, right? But reading this, going through this with Pai, it almost like puts you in that situation where you're rooting for him. And again, in this situation, it's like Pai has lost, and that's also what he's thinking. I mean, does this isolation really lead to, I don't know, growth? Does it really lead to something? I mean, this is just absurd. But for Pai, I think it did. It did lead to something. It did lead to development. It's not a clean or easy journey, but it may have came with a lot of pain, doubt, and confusion, but it's not like he finds all the answers right away, right? There are moments where he can't just find any meaning in what's going on, what's happening to him. But I think that that's a part of the reality of isolation, that it forces you to confront the rawest parts of yourself, even the parts that you might not want to face. And in the end, this struggle is what shaped Pai into this person. I mean, the loneliness amplifies everything: his fear, his desires, his need for connection, and again, his growing understanding of who he really is. I mean, this part of the story is so powerful because it highlights the mental toll that solitude takes on someone. Pai isn't just fighting to stay alive physically, but he's also fighting to maintain his sense of self, to not lose himself in the middle of this ocean. I mean, in the face of overwhelming isolation, he battles this, and he won. And it's so important that he went through all of this, because Pai emerges to be stronger, to be more introspective, right? And more deeply connected to the world around him. And survival doesn't just teach him how to stay alive, it teaches him how to understand his own mind and heart in ways he never expected. On our 7th journal entry, I want to talk about one of the most significant turning points in Pai's journey, and that is the discovery of the Mysteries Island. I mean, after weeks of fighting to stay alive on the lifeboat, the island appears. It's like a beacon of hope. It's a moment where Pai finally believes he's found salvation. In this island, he finds fresh water, food, and shelter. I mean, this is a lot for Pai thus far, and for a brief moment, he allows himself to believe that he has been rescued, that all his suffering and struggles has finally ended. And it led him to this island right here. And honestly, reading it, it's almost too good to be true. But again, it's the break that Pai needed. At first, the island seems to be the answers to Pai's prayers. It's a place where he can rest and regain the strength he's lost during his journey. And the water are clear, and it's deep. It's abundant. There's so much of it. He finally feels like his life is being regained back to his body. He finds food, a sense of peace, and a break. Finally, a break for Pai. And this overwhelming stress of surviving at sea, it's such a stark contrast to the exhaustion he felt on the lifeboat. I mean, for a moment, it's easy for Pai to forget the months of terror. This is a chance to breathe, to heal, and to feel human again. And it's the kind of break that Pai has been craving for so long. And then things start to get strange. I mean, it's too good to be true. It is strange in this island. I mean, the first sign that the island isn't as perfect as it may seem is that the algae in the freshwater pool, at first Pai sees it as another part of the island, like something unnatural, maybe even beautiful. But soon, he discovers that the algae is carnivorous. It consumes anything that touches it, turning what seemed like a life-giving source into a lethal trap. It's not giving life, it's taking. It's almost as if the island is playing tricks on him, like offering him salvation, making him feel good just to take it all away. And this moment is a reminder that Pai's journey has never been simple. I mean, there's always something beneath the surface, something hidden beneath the illusion of safety. And then there are these meerkats that he's discovered, right? At first they seem like harmless creatures, just another part of the island. But as Pai spends more time, he realized they're feeding off the carnivorous algae. I mean, creating this bizarre cycle of life that's both unsettling and dangerous. The island that seemed like a sanctuary now feels like a trap, like a place that promises peace, but quickly reveals its dark side. Pai had thought he found safety, and so did we as readers. But now we understand that this sanctuary is just temporary. And what really stands out to me about this part is that the island symbolizes this fleeting nature of safety and hope in his life. It's just a brief moment for him to finally breathe, to finally feel peace again. And then it just ends. And it serves a reminder that survival isn't about finding a permanent refuge. And Pai spends more time on the island, right? He comes to this painful realization that the place he thought would save him isn't the answer after all. The island, no matter how comforting it initially felt, it is not a permanent solution. And he realized that he needed to leave. And In many ways, the island represents this fleeting moments of comfort, right? And the happiness we experience in life. We all have these moments. I mean, when things seem to align perfectly, when we feel safe and secure, and finally there's a place for us. Like Pi, we know that those moments are often short-lived. Life, like survival, is unpredictable, and the island is a reminder that nothing lasts forever, not even things that seems like salvation. It's a lesson that no matter how perfect something appears, we can't cling to it forever. We have to keep moving forward, even when the answers aren't clear. Eighth journal entry, we will be talking about the aftermath when Pi leaves the carnivorous island. At this point, his mental and physical state is deteriorating. One of the most horrifying moments comes when Pi suddenly goes blind. For days he's unable to see, and the world around him becomes an even more terrifying place. The constant loneliness feels even worse now. I mean, now he's only left with his thoughts and his hearing and smell and touch, but in this lifeboat, it is crucial to have your sight. Now he can't even see Richard Parker, the tiger that can kill him at any moment. This situation is unpredictable for Pi. He can die. And not knowing where the tiger is or what it's doing makes Pi's already fragile existence feel even more vulnerable. And there's an almost surreal moment when, being blind, Pi encountered another person, another human being. After being alone for so long, I remember Pi describing the strange gaunt man who appears in the distance floating on a small raft. Pi can hardly believe his eyes. I mean, he's blind after all, but for so long, he's had nothing but himself. I mean, he had Richard Parker, of course, but it's only him and his thoughts, and the idea of seeing another person is almost beyond comprehension. But the encounter, as brief as it is, quickly turns into a tragic and brutal confrontation. The man is desperate and clearly weakened by his own ordeal. We can see what people can do when they're in the midst of death and survival. I mean, this man tries to board Pi's lifeboat, and Pi, already exhausted and vulnerable, he cannot fend for himself anymore. He is blind and he's weakened, and he cannot protect himself. And the man tries to attack Pi, likely trying to take the lifeboat for himself. And in that moment, Richard Parker comes out of his hiding and kills the man. It's definitely one of the most unsettling moments on Pi's journey, and the violence is brutal, and it forces Pi to face this primal side of survival. I mean, the man's death is a stark reminder of how far people can be pushed when survival is at stake, and how the human's capacity for violence and desperation can surface when faced with death. It's tragic end for the man, and it leaves Pi with a brutal lesson. Survival strips people of their humanity in ways they might never expect. And after that, Pi is left alone again. Now it's just him and Richard Parker again, and the fleeting hope for human connection, for companionship, is gone in an instant. I mean, when the man tried to kill him, tried to take his own life, Pi cried. Pi felt empathy for this man, because for even a little bit he sensed that hope of connection again, of being able to connect with another human being again. But now it is replaced by this deep sense of isolation and loss. On our ninth journal entry, I will mainly focus about Pi's struggle after he has been rescued, because Pi, it's not just in the lifeboat he has to survive in, it's also after. And again, it emphasizes the fact that it's never truly the end. It's always just the beginning of the new journey, right? And I really want to first talk about what happened while he was being rescued, and that is when he started to pass out and Richard Parker fled from the scene. And again, that moment for the readers and also for Pi is so heartbreaking, because Richard Parker seemed almost like a friend to us and a friend to Pi. I mean, after 227 days in the ocean, you would believe that they have formed this friendship and this connection that surpasses leaving him on the ground, fleeing from him. And that is honestly like a betrayal for me. And I think it just emphasizes how the relationship and how it is different from both sides. Because for Pi and for the readers, it might have felt deeper. It might have felt more of a connection and a friendship and this human nature of feelings. But for Richard Parker, it's about survival, and it's about what Pi offers to him, the food that Pi gives him, the water that Pi gives him. For him, it's survival. For him, it's what he did to live another day. And again, for me, that is just heartbreaking, but it's also beautiful the way that Martel didn't truly code as the ending, because it's easy to write, an ending that is, oh, Pi went through and he was rescued along with Richard Parker, and then he kept him in his house or something like that. But it's brutal, and it's heartbreaking, and it's real. I mean, why would we expect tigers or Richard Parker, though he has the name of a human, why would we expect him to show empathy like humans do? On our final journal entry, I will now be talking about the two versions of Pai's story, which is the truth and which is not. And this ending it left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the story. I mean, Pai offers the Japanese officials two versions, right? One with the animals and one without. And then he asked them something so interesting. He asked, which version do you prefer? And in this moment, it's almost like Pai is not just asking the Japanese officials that, he's also asking us, the readers, which version do we prefer? Is it the one where it's almost magical and surreal? Or is it the one that is more grounded in reality and honestly paints a much darker and more painful picture of human nature? But if Pai is asking the officials to choose, what is Martel's point? Does it matter if the story with the tiger is true in a literal sense, or is it the emotional truth that matters the most? I mean, truly, which version is the truth? And honestly, does it even matter? At this point, I'm questioning, how do we even define truth? Is truth just about facts? Or does it also encompass the feelings and the experiences and the trauma and maybe even the illusions that Pai faced and went through? I mean, he endured that in isolation and survival that is also extreme, but it's all so true and real for him. I mean, the more fantastical version with Richard Parker gives the story a sense of wonder and fight for humanity. If Pai had only told the version without the animals, would his story have seemed like a pointless struggle, a horrifying loss? What does it say about human need for meaning? I mean, honestly, it makes me question why Pai tells the officials two different stories in the first place. And then he asks them which one they prefer. It's like, does that mean that he wants to believe in the tiger story himself, or is he leaving it up to others to decide what version of his journey is worth believing? Take meaning in our own lives. What version of our own stories do we choose to tell others, right? I mean, which version do I believe? I'm not even sure. Maybe it's not about choosing one version, though. Maybe it's about understanding that both versions are equally valid in their own way. It both represented his struggles, his resilience, and his attempt to come to terms with the horror he faced. And in the end, perhaps the story we choose to believe is just as important as truth itself. This entry raises a lot of questions about the truth, about storytelling and emotional meaning, while we're reflecting on Pai's choices to offer two versions of the story. The emphasis is on the idea that the emotional truth of the story might matter more than its factual accuracy, inviting deep reflections about how we, as readers, understand and interpret the narratives of our own lives.